Hello everybody, this is Chris. We'll be getting into episode 183 of the Crate and Crowbar very shortly, which we recorded last week live at Res. The first time we've ever done a podcast in front of a room full of real people. Terrifying. I was joined by Graham and Pip for the show. I wanted to introduce that and also partly to apologise in advance for some of the audio issues with this recording. The nature of a live show means it's not quite at the same quality we would normally go for a podcast, and also there are some specific moments where the microphones are cut out, which can be a little bit annoying, but hopefully you'll bear with us. Also, towards the end of the show, Graham's microphone dies and he has to share with Pip. It's an adventure in things going slightly, but not fatally, wrong. Also, towards the end of the show, an hour from now, so this explanation is somewhat premature, you'll hear me ask Graham if he's played a game called... What I'm trying to say is FIFA The Journey. I figured you'd be wondering about that, so I thought I'd let you know in advance. Anyway, before we get into the show, I just wanted to say that because of the audio recording difficulties and the fact that it's a shorter pod than usual, we won't be charging Patreon backers for this episode, but we are immensely grateful to all of our Patreon backers who allow us to do the show and the spin-offs every other week that we are doing this. So if you'd like to find out more about our Patreon, you can do so at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. That's the only plug I'll do. See you at the end of the episode for the sign-off, but for now, enjoy live Crate and Crowbar.
Where you sing the theme tune?
Yeah. No, it isn't.
Go on,
Isn't the
then.
part where you sing the theme tune?
Oh no, because we've done that before and I did it all wrong.
Did I include that in the...
Yeah, you see.
Hello and welcome to episode 183 of the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston, and tonight I am joined by Philippa Waugh
Hello.
and Graham Smith,
Hello.
both of rockpapershotgun.com. If you're unaware, I'm unemployed.
Ish.
Thank you so much for coming. This is obviously tremendously strange for everyone, mostly me. And so, but thank you for joining us as we do the first ever podcast we've done live after more than 180 of doing these in the privacy of our own home.
I've done a live podcast.
Sure, but, okay.
For someone else.
So, what we're going to do is basically do the podcast that we would normally do. If you're not aware, that's a informal chat about PC games with this and water, if you're Graham.
I could actually use this recap because I haven't done this in like a year and a half.
Oh yeah. Also, welcome back, Graham.
Hello. Remember me? Maybe.
Returned from his tax haven to grace us on stage. So we're going to do the podcast what we would normally do. We're going to talk about what we've been playing, and then we're going to do questions from you rather than from the internet, which means we won't know what they are in advance. But
That's awkward.
I say that now because it would be a good idea to start thinking of questions you might ask if you haven't already. And also because I need to say this again. Thank you so much for coming. I had no idea if we would be just doing what we normally did, but in a bigger, emptier room. And the fact that we are actually talking to real people is the reason I've rotated my chair slightly this way.
I mean, you are actually here for the live podcast, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're not
So
just...
actually, also as a public service announcement, the Warhammer announcement is taking place over there. We may well get an influx of people in about half an hour when they've finished announcing whatever it is they announce, and I wouldn't actually be surprised if that included Tom Senior. It won't, because he's not here, but nonetheless. So, to kick off, we'll skip news because we're on the clock. Pip,
Hello.
what have you been playing?
Oh God.
You know how this works.
Yes. So I have been playing a bunch of things. Megaquarium. So excited. It's essentially a theme park management game, but with fish. And you build little tanks and you populate them with fish and you get to augment them with little decorative rocks and pirate chests and little algae things and filters to keep the water clean, and you can watch your fish grow. And I stuck around and I made the developer do all of the cheats in the thing so that we could quickly basically level up this rainbow-coloured grouper fish because I just wanted to see it get bigger. And he was called Flash and he was my favourite. So yeah.
What do you do in this game?
You build an aquarium that's fun to visit.
How does the game judge whether an aquarium is fun to visit?
Well, I was asking about this because they're still quite early on. They've only just announced that the thing even exists, so I rather unfairly went over and told them everything I like about fish and about my...
Are you a designer on this game now? You're a
I might be a
consultant.
consultant, yeah. I was explaining everything that I liked about my visit to the Bristol Aquarium and things about seahorses and stuff I've learned about jellyfish, and I think they answered a few things. And then I got out my phone and showed them my Tap Tap Fish aquarium and talked about sea dragons, and I'm so sure that he answered some of this, but I was in full flow. But yeah, so I think there's going to be a certain amount of just, is there variety? Is there, like, have you maintained the cleanliness of the aquariums? Are the fish happy? You know, things like that are going to inform the basics of that. But, they were also talking about potentially having, breeding for different traits in fish and like little, the ability to crossbreed and get different colors and different, you know, sort of, mottling and things like that. I was, properly geeking out. But, so that's really fun. And it's in the corner bit of the room that has the big inflatable green tentacles, if that helps.
It's in the room that has giant cop in it, is that correct?
I literally just saw the fish. I have no idea what else is
in the room that has giant cop in it. I went and saw it earlier.
You can also use like the Rezzed app, the EGX app, to find it, to type the name of the game in.
You're really on brand.
I know.
This is so useful.
This is what I've been doing this past year and a half.
Has anything else jumped out at you from the show, Pip? Has anyone jumped out at you at the show?
Yeah, a little bit. I've been really enjoying playing the build of Snake Pass that's here, just because I really love the movement system that they've built, and it works so well. And you play as a snake that is slithering around collecting things in that 3D platformer, bright and breezy way that maybe reminds most people of N64 games.
Looks like a Rare game.
Yeah, basically. And so but the real thing about that is that you move forward, but by wiggling the analog stick from side to side to go faster, so that you are actually following a kind of snaky kind of trajectory, I guess. But the animal has such a kind of pleasing heft to it, and it's accompanied by a hummingbird, and so, it's basically ticking all of the boxes, and then I cornered the developer and asked his favorite snake facts and things.
It's ticking all of the boxes. Does it have fish in it?
Well, no, but that's why you get Mega Aquarium.
Oh, okay, so
you
together.
just shuttle between the two things, really. I mean, what do you want from me? I want to be at the zoo.
You could just buy a snake and buy an aquarium and have them in your house.
Yeah. Yeah. We could.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, sure. All right.
Well, that's settled.
Okay,
anyway,
cool.
So what are you guys going to do?
So, yeah, Graham, you can talk about what you've seen at the show so far, but you've been off the podcast for 18 months almost. So what have you been doing?
I've been raising a new podcaster who'll be ready in about 17 years, I guess.
Yes.
Thereabouts.
It's his birthday today, isn't it?
It is. He's 1 year old.
Aww.
Oh. 1 year old.
Thanks to the person who almost clapped.
Yeah. I spoke to my partner, his mum, earlier, and he accidentally set off a panic alarm in the flat that we're staying in, which was good.
Like a panic room, or like?
No, not a panic room, just a panic alarm that, sounds sirens and causes lights to flash and alerts the concierge downstairs. and then eventually the police, although apparently it was headed off before it got that far. So yeah, babies, huh?
Yeah. Anyway, but video games.
Yeah, I might be a bit rusty at this because I haven't. It's not
Spoken
just that
to somebody
I have.
in 18
yeah,
months.
I have. No, you jest. But I don't talk to a lot of people on Jersey about video games or at all.
I Skype in every now and
occasionally. But then we don't talk about games either.
Oh God, no. We talk about Gilmore Girls.
We do talk about Gilmore Girls.
And
Let's do a
America's
Gilmore
Next
Girls
Top Model.
podcast, Chris.
One thing at a time, Graham. There are people here. We've got company.
Oh, yeah. What have you played?
What have you played at Rezzed?
What have you played?
Well, I won't tell you right away about a game I played. I'll tell you about a game I saw, which was Sigma Theory, which is from the developers of Out There, that kind of cool interactive fiction-y FTL style game where you're traveling through a galaxy and making decisions on your spaceship as you go along. And this is their follow-up to that, but it is about spies, and spies are better than spaceships. So they are. We'll come back to that. It's a world
You've identified the exact middle point between me and Tom Francis.
It's a world map, and you choose a country to control, and you become basically the director of that country's spy agency, whether that be CIA or MI5. And then the backstory is that a new technological discovery has been made. People have discovered this thing called Sigma, which is going to speed up tech research of all kinds. And so you are sending spies around the world, trying to get scientists to come work for your side so that you can research Sigma faster than any of the other countries. And like out there, every action you're doing has a kind of interactive fiction element to it. So the spies that you've got have traits, and you can send them off to do things, and you can tell them, hey, go kidnap that person, and they might have a trait that says that they don't like to do that, and based on the conversation you have with them, they might refuse your order, they might defect, that sort of stuff. But ultimately, you're sending them off to other countries to research, to find weapons, that sort of stuff, and eventually find these scientists, and then you tail the scientists, and you find out information about them, and they too have traits. So, because then you want to coerce the scientists to come to your side, which you can do either by kidnapping them, corrupting them, or seducing them. And so, you might find that a person has a trait that they're particularly lusty or whatever, and that means that the seduction trait will work better and that sort of stuff.
I mean, the scientists will have that trait, or your
scientists,
okay.
Sorry.
Oh, wow.
And then when you decide to exfiltrate a scientist, however you've decided to do that, it kind of zooms into like a turn-based view of a city where you're then directing your agent through the city as they're pursued by police forces, trying to get the scientist out of the city using whatever means you've decided. And that's similarly like a set of interactive fiction decisions that you're making. And again, the spy might decide to ignore you. And depending on how that goes, you might succeed and get the scientist, or you might fail, and your agent might end up dead, or they might end up arrested. And in that situation, you can then talk to the diplomats of that country and like negotiate them for the spy's release, and maybe trade them some of the technology that you've discovered elsewhere. And then diplomats from different countries will have different desires. So again, they've got traits. And then the fourth group of people that you're essentially negotiating with in this game is lobbyists. Each country has its own set of lobbyists that will lobby for you to pursue development in their desired technology tree. And you can then trade with them and that sort of stuff. So like if you do a bunch of research on AI and then trade that with the AI lobbyists, they will help you with equipment in different countries. And so it's like a multi-layered strategy game, and every part of it is feeding back into the grander strategy of it and that sort of stuff. And it's the interactive fiction stuff really appeals to me. I like strategy games where it's not just about numbers, but it's much more about conversations you're having with people. It is about numbers, ultimately, everything is. But they disguise that stuff with words.
So it sounds a little bit like Invisible Ink in structure?
A little bit in structure, yeah, but in terms of format, it's much less, like you're not directing individual little men around a map in an XCOM kind of way. Like even the city view, it's quite zoomed out. It's just an icon with a kind of Google Map style view of a quite large area of a city. And at each corner junction, basically, as you're making your way through the city, you make a decision from like an interactive fiction kind of branching narrative thing.
Right, you don't, agree to take the horny scientist that you're extracting from McDonald's on the way out. Or...
Well, that might be one of the options, but you don't individually click on the McDonald's to send them there.
I understand. Cool. So how far along is this? Because I know has it been in development for a while?
I don't know. I thought it had only been announced last year, which doesn't feel like a while to me, but it's not due for release until probably next year, unless they decide to do early access, in which case it might be at the very end of this year.
So they're here with something else, or are they?
They're here with that, and also with another game which isn't coming to PC, and the name of which I did not therefore commit to memory.
Good job, Graham.
I'm very on brand.
That's very strongly on brand. So what else have you been playing while you're here? Because that's something you've seen, right? But it's still at a very early stage.
Yeah, it's far enough along that you could play it, but I did not. I also played a game called Moonlighter, which looks really nice. And I mean that in terms of it just looks really nice. It's beautiful pixel art, and it's a kind of top-down Zelda-ish game. Do you remember Reciteer, an item shop
Yes.
tale, where you're like running a fantasy store selling goods to fantasy adventurers that are going around? This, you're similarly selling a store selling adventuring goods to adventurers, but you yourself are also an adventurer. You can go off to kind of Binding of Isaac style procedural dungeons, fight your way through them against various monsters who drop loot and unlock chests, and the equipment that you find you then take back to your shop to sell to the other people in this town. And it feels like a game I've played before, but it just looks so goddamn pretty, basically. It's all grass blowing in the wind, and it's Zelda. It's Zelda. It's Zelda.
It's really interesting, like seeing how well integrated into this show now all the indie stuff is, right? We were talking about this earlier, so it's not a totally fresh take, I'm afraid. But there's a sense that, like, walking around, this is my first Dresd as well, but walking around here, you see indie stuff everywhere and smaller games alongside bigger games. And I don't know what that speaks to necessarily, but it's a really interesting shift to have observed in how these events feel compared to something like EGX was 5 years ago or something like that. Don't know if that's...
I think it's always been the goal of Rezzed to incorporate indie stuff, and it does feel like indie is just growing every year, just as it is across the whole industry. I think Tobacco Doc is it sound like marketing for this event.
They're already here, Graham.
Tobacco Doc's my favourite venue because you get natural light.
Yeah, I can
cannot
cancel out the
overstate.
marketing talk by saying that I was here when it was at the NEC 3 or 4 years ago, and it sucked. It was awful. Do not go to the NEC. It is
basically
not
under no
a nice place.
circumstances.
John's going to cut the stream
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But like, yeah, I don't know. Cause I really, everything that's in the RPS room is indie actually, isn't it? Like we haven't got any sort of massive games down there, but it's all stuff that is super exciting and really like is getting people interested and that they want to play. And also it's quite nice because we're offering like another station for that to be. So for example, it's stuff like Everything, which is the David O'Reilly game where you can be everything from like a universe to a pollen grain, and you know you can then herd, and I led a herd of buildings into a swamp and then changed into a turtle, which was awesome. But that game is at a few different points.
Hang
around.
on, can you back up a little bit?
Yeah.
So this.
Which part was unclear?
What do you do in Everything?
Oh, okay. I should probably have led with that.
Yeah, well, for my benefit.
So you can become a load of buildings and
Yeah.
go into a swamp.
Okay.
And then you can become a turtle. No, so, do you remember there was a game called Nesting? Nesting or Nested? So it was essentially a big file tree of the universe, and you would click on... Seriously? Anyone?
It's a big concept.
This was just like a web page, wasn't it?
you.
With like,
Yeah, and you could you double click on a file and it would open another sort of bit of the file tree, and it would be, you'd go from solar system down to planet, down to individual like cities, and then from there into buildings and into, and it would just keep going down and down and down and down and sort of, I think eventually looped back in on itself. And this feels very much like a 3D manifestation of the same idea. And so you load in as kind of as a galaxy perhaps, and you can move around. But when you get near another galaxy, you can either press a button that encourages it to kind of swarm with you and little hearts pop out and you're essentially friends and you can right. All right.
All right. No, okay. Keep going.
Or you can keep going sort of up or down by one size.
Right.
And so you can go from that galaxy arrangement and it zooms in and you get to like a sun and you get to a set of planets, and then you can go in and you are a giant rock and you can roll along the landscape, and then you meet a hyena, and you become the hyena, and they have an amazing movement system where none of them move some of them move in a realistic fashion, but when it's like the quadrupeds, they just go like it's like
So
rolling
everything
a
rolls.
block along.
Right.
And it just sort of goes in a really jerky kind of adorably enthusiastic but not animated in any traditional sense way. And you can gather them all up and then just go like bowling across the world. And I ended up trooping across, like I say, into this swamp as a set of old desert buildings and a sort of stepped ziggurat thing.
You haven't gathered all of those buildings around you like in Katamari Damacy.
No, so you can just sort of group up with things near you of a similar size. Yeah, you can kind of swarm.
I see.
Isn't there also narration in this game? Isn't there also philosophers talking and messages from the buildings about how they're feeling?
If you start chatting to them, yes, but you can just ignore that and be a turtle. I didn't really do much of the chatting because I was very keen to turtles.
Graham, back up. So you can go to the entire universe.
The lobster waggles so cutely. Sorry.
You can go to the whole universe and ask a waggly lobster how it feels.
Well, no, sometimes it will just offer to tell you and then you can listen to it.
Okay, this is at the show. Yes, it's not a dream.
It's in the RPS room, obviously.
Okay. Sorry for
the left field and in the indie room and stuff, but there's
indeed
like
all around us.
Yeah.
So, sorry for interrupting. I was just genuinely thrown by the promise of the Magic game that does everything where all things are possible.
I'll show you.
Okay.
Good.
Excellent. You were saying about something.
I don't know what I was saying about, but also there was vaccination, which, have you guys played that?
No.
Does anyone play that yet? Okay, cool. So it's downstairs in the left field collection, and it's very much the sort of thing that you might find in the alt control section of GDC, because so what you've got is on a computer screen, you've got a kind of scanner, rudimentary scanner that will move up and down across a body, and you can start to see where different coloured blobs might be causing an infection near limbs or, basically different body parts. And then the other player has a sort of wooden version of a body right in front of them with different points where they can put a little controller shaped like an injector. And so what you're doing is you're picking up different coloured fluids to match the infection, and then injecting them into the body at the right point, with the person who's manning the scanner telling you how this works.
Do you actually inject a thing?
No,
like,
because
is there actual
then I would have
fluids?
freaked out. But what it is it's a series of holes in the thing, and you put the
Syringe.
That is the syringe. But it has, instead of a needle, it's just got like a blunt screw which forms the thing that makes the connection with the point that's buried inside the board. And then it registers which colour that you've picked up through that, and then you apply it in the same way to the site on the body. So that's really cool. I think we should have more alt controllers. I think that's the one thing I would say I miss.
More where?
Here.
Oh,
everywhere.
it shows everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere.
It's interesting because there are definitely games like Alt Control at GDC where those games are amazing show games. Like they're fantastic for an environment like this because they're the kind of thing you're not going to see anywhere else.
Yeah, it would be perfect.
Yeah, and VR can be used in really interesting ways in that context as well. But And it's a perfectly valid thing to have this whole side of game development, which is about creating one-off games for shows, which is a sort of you think of everything of having to eventually be released in some kind of form that you could play at home, and all of this definitely can't, I guess, but...
A lot of it, you have a thing that you could maybe feasibly play without the custom controller, but the custom controller is a thing that can go to different shows and showcase the game in a very specific or different way.
Right.
And sort of augment the experience that way. Some of them are entirely specific and can't be played another way, but, there are other ways of doing things. Like last year there was the coffin game, if any of you were here last year. I can't remember what it was called, but you got inside a coffin and someone was trying to find where you had been buried alive. by communicating with you from outside the...
Did you have the confidence to play this game?
Oh yeah, I was in the coffin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did not.
Although, right, so the problem that I found was they were like, oh yeah, and you'll probably feel quite claustrophobic. I was like, mate, I've got loads of room. It's brilliant. I could make a snow angel in here. So I was just quite chill. I was having a nice time. It was quite airy.
Wait, what were you doing inside the coffin? Like, if the others were trying to find where you were buried, what was your role in there?
Let me try and remember, because I mostly remember that it was quite cozy and quiet.
Did you go to sleep?
I wanted to. So I think, if I remember rightly, the person outside had the, just a regular computer display and was just moving around in a regular fashion for the world. But I inside had, a VR headset on and could sort of hear whether they sounded like they were near and things like that. So.
Would that work if you were buried alive?
Well, it was in a crypt.
Oh.
Like I wasn't just in the ground.
In the ground.
I was in a tomb. I was entombed.
Okay, I see.
In some kind of...
Interred.
No, I wasn't interred.
Is that not the same thing? Let's not split that.
Well, no, I wasn't buried.
Right.
I was trapped in a coffin, but in more of the sarcophagus mold of
I see.
Doing things.
Okay.
I was going to say an ossuary, but that's different. Anyway.
Okay. I see what you mean. So you're listening to the ambient sound, trying to figure out where
I think
your friends are.
I wrote an article about it.
Well,
if
it was just ambient sound, why did you have a VR headset on? Why not just
Look,
headphones?
Let's not be quizzing me on things that happened a year ago.
All right. The image of being inside a coffin wearing a VR headset is just very strange.
We put it on the website.
You can kind of do either or in that scenario. You can either just wear the VR headset or be in an actual coffin. Doubling down is one way of doing it.
Redundant.
Yeah.
What have you been playing, Chris?
So I got to the show about 3 hours ago. So I've run around and played two things where I've had time to sit down and actually get to grips with the game. The first thing I played, and the only thing I finished a full sort of session of, was Wargroove. I don't know if anyone played Wargroove. It is a lot like Advanced Wars, if you ever played that on the Game Boy. It's a Game Boy strategy game, turn-based strategy about sort of resource management and moving units around on a grid to capture towns and cut off lines of advance and trap important units, and while also managing the kind of rock, paper, scissors counters between, little wizardy skeletons and men and harpies and caravans. Those are the 4 units I immediately remember. I'm really, really, really bad at it. Like, staggeringly bad at it. Do you need some help, sir? Bad at it. And, but one of the reasons for this is that, one of the units, it allows you to build, immediately with your starting flow of cash. And it's been published by, or assisted by Ticklefish, who made, I keep saying Stardew Valley, and I don't mean that. I mean,
I think they published Stardew Valley, didn't they?
They did publish Stardew Valley.
Yeah, so that was almost...
That was close. All right.
They developed Starbound.
Starbound. That's the one I was trying to think of.
I was going to say Star Sailor. That's a band from a long time ago.
Starband.
I bought their album.
So it has a super kind of cute, cartoony pixel art style. And the first unit is like men, like warriors or something. And then the second unit is doggos. And it's a little band of armored corgis.
Oh,
I know. And they cost 150 gold pieces. The next one up is like spearmen. Then up from that is a caravan. And then up from that is alchemists, which is like the sort of the order of life, I believe. But I stopped resolutely at doggos. I had no interest. It was sort of this partly like, well, for one session of this before I move on so the next person can play, and you get like 50 gold a turn, 100 gold a turn if you've captured a couple of villages. I could save up for alchemists, but I don't need ranged attacks. I'm going to win this with dogs, because I'm sure that they've tuned the difficulty of this res show floor demo appropriately, that you can't lose really. It's just there to have a fun time and get to grips with this broad strategic top layer. So you know what will be fun? I'll win this game using only dogs. I lost very, very badly.
poor dogs.
Because dogs have no answer to harpies. They just don't. They're very good against skeletons. I've found if they get the drop on a skeleton, that's a good time.
But they are good versus bones, you see.
Exactly, yeah. And they're so cute. They're okay versus an alchemist. They don't like an alchemist, really. They get lightninged, which isn't nice. But, I had a good time surging these waves through the forest. I would load up a dog in a caravan, send it across the map, deploy it, try and get it to take a town. They're also not very good at sieging entrenched positions. I found they against a fortified fortress, they again have no answers. But they're nice. They have a counterpart on the undead faction, who the villains in the demo, or player 2 if you're playing multiplayer. They're a sort of, skeleton. I got my game nouns mixed up. Dogs with like skull heads that I was sad about killing, but I was glad that they were the enemy dogs because I didn't feel too bad relative to the armored battle corgis. What ultimately happened is I charged all my units forward in this kind of like, well, one glorious, we're in, we're out, we're going for it kind of way, and didn't realize that you have a general unit who's powerful and can heal your other units, but if she dies, the game is over. That is one of the rules of the game, it turns out. And she got trapped on a bridge with harpies either side. She couldn't move past the harpies, which I felt was a little bit unfair because nothing else can hit the harpies because the harpies are flying. So it seems like the harpies selectively decide when they are impassable or not. But they're definitely, as I keep saying, immune to dog in almost all forms. So I had a little line of dogs on a drawbridge waiting to try and help, but they weren't helping. In fact, they were in the way. And then my general got killed, and then the game was over. But as someone who did like Advance Wars, despite being apparently totally incapable, it has, I think, a lot of promise as that kind of game. It's nice to have, it's an example of what you were saying earlier about the game that reminded you of Zelda. There are these brilliant core designs from other platforms in some cases and other parts of the history of doing strategy games. There's a little bit of Fire Emblem in it as well, I think, in the way that the units match up against each other and the way the positioning is important and the way you set yourself up for success in subsequent turns. And yeah, it looked super sweet and kind of, that experience of managing this complex economic game of 3D rock, paper, scissors.
I assume this is a thing that's on PC, right?
Yes, yeah, I played it with a mouse. It's all designed to be controlled with a mouse as well, so there are no keybinds to remember. It's really nice and straightforward. And I did genuinely like it. I wouldn't take my inability to wrangle success out of the game. Well, actually, I would take the fact that you can't just build dogs until you win as a success for the game. At a strategic level, if not at a personal level. So that was good.
Maybe you didn't wield the dogs correctly. Maybe there's still hope for dogs.
I did literally just build the dog, click the furthest point away from the dog that was closest to the enemy, and then, sometimes you could set up like a multi-dog squadron convergence. Which is not a phrase I've used before. And then, and that would have more. There seems to be a lot of waiting. Like, it's interesting, like the matchups, the damage is very analog. It's not like, you have taken 3 dogs out of a possible 4 dogs worth of damage. It's like there's a bar and you don't really know, you don't see the numbers of the combat really, you just know the matchup and you see like a percentage. I was confused, I think. But when you go into the attack, there are factors like being the aggressor, obviously that gives you a huge advantage, but that seems to depend on the matchup. So the dogs really like being on the attack. There's an adorable animation of them sort of, I was going to say thundering forward, but I don't think a corgi can thunder. Like, just sort of bimbling, like power bimbling, into battle, which I found very gratifying. It communicates a lot with simple animations as well. Like, if 2 things aren't particularly well matched, they sort of stop as the 2 units meet, and then there's a kind of nice it's more obvious that the combat's going to be close. So in that way, despite knowing nothing and remaining in many ways clueless, I actually was taught a lot of the matchups just by the game itself, rather than needing to like read a bunch of tooltips to know that spearmen beat caravans or dogs, alchemists beat dogs, which is that's a toss up. That's just down to the initiative and the will to survive. The other game that I played, and I admit I only played for 15, 20 minutes, and for the type of game it is, that's insufficient, was Signal from Tolva, which is Jim's game. Yeah.
Speaking of being on brand.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm going to talk about the game made by the man who works for the website that you work for.
He founded
the website
co-founded
you work for. I liked it. He'll be relieved to hear. So Signal from Tolva is by Big Robot, the people who made Sir, You Are Being Hunted. And it is in the same vein in that, I think it was Marsh on a recent episode described Jim's love for Stalker as being spoogy for factions, I believe was the word that, which to unpack that means that, I know Jim has an enthusiasm for open world shooters that have a lot of dynamic AI where nothing is there by accident, not a constructed experience with a scripted series of encounters, but a world you are dropped into in the manner of Stalker, where you kind of pick your own path with a mixture of combat and resource gathering and also the manipulation of AI factions in order to achieve your particular aim. And so based on that first couple of minutes with Tolva, which basically was enough for me to kind of get into it, do a little bit of running around, upgrade myself a few times, and get in a couple of fights and sort of see what the units of the game are, like the ways you might divide up your time in it. The things I liked about it, one, are that it is a shooter, that it is a return to being a shooter. Stalker, as much as it was a prototypical survival game in some ways, like, the subsequent survival genre maybe owes some things to Stalker. It was also a shooter. You also had quite a lot of power, and you could express that power just by being good at shooting. And I like that. And I didn't realize how much I'd missed that from, I think I missed that in Sir, You Are Being Hunted, actually.
It's much more of a stealth game.
Yeah, it's more of a stealth game. But I think in a survival context, that often means it's a game about inventory management and running. To an extent. Like, obviously, at higher difficulty levels, and depending on, in that case, randomly generated maps, you might play it, have entirely the perfect experience where every encounter is atmospheric and dramatic. Whereas combat is just a reliably fun thing in a video game, and everyone understands that. And so, having these sort of chunky sci-fi weapons that fire quite slow projectiles, which I'm a fan of generally, because I like leading targets and things like that. I was quickly having a good time kind of managing like this shield you have to deploy and firing a railgun at a little bibbly robot that, I will do that in any context. That was fun. And then so that, I think, has promise for just sort of maintaining that engagement in the otherwise kind of like unguided experience of doing it yourself. The other thing I liked about it was that the setup, which has you, and I imagine we talked about this in the pod before, but that has you beam into the brain of a robot that you control until it dies, then you beam into a different robot, but you're there to kind of manipulate all of the robots that are just doing their own thing on this planet to achieve your own ends. And I think that's a kind of a perfect way to position the player in a game like that, because it explicitly means that your job is to be not a dick, but kind of a dick to all of the different robot factions. Whereas any game that has a more substantially human-centric fiction, where Stalker is a good example, where you have this faction are trying and this faction is assholes, and that is how it breaks down. Then it's hard, you might feel pressured by plot concerns or other things to weigh your allegiance in a particular way, whereas in this it's more like, no, you are the asshole. And you've come down from space to get your own way, and that'll mean siding with who you need to side with and doing what you need to do. So that was only 20 minutes, but it was good.
Would you have called it Signal from Space, Arthur?
I would have called it Singles from Tolva, which is how I misspelled it once. It was a very different game. A lot more like that game you described earlier. I'll put it that way. Never mind. Let's do
questions.
Questions from there.
Yes.
Weird. We have a spare microphone, but I don't know if it's on. Hello. It's not. Is it?
Sounds.
Yes.
Hey.
That was the first question. So, the best way to do this is probably going to be, also for your information, guys who are here in the room right now, we actually have basically until they kick us out. So, which will be 6. So it's not loads of time, but it means we don't have to rush through questions over 20 minutes, and then there's drinks after. So, hey.
Do you want to, shall we put that on the first row of benches?
Yeah.
Oh, Alec.
Alec Meir, everybody. Could you,
Our lovely assistant, Alec Meir.
My first question is how you justify working on your creator-owned project during RPS working hours.
Is this RPS working hours?
Well, he's
I started
freelance.
early.
Blame me, Alec is the one for them.
Leaving aside whether espionage is better or worse than spaceships, why do you think it is so rare as a theme in games? Because other than the very, very few games, like the only ones I can think of is Alpha Protocol and the Sid Meier's Covert Action, and like obviously sort of some tacked on mechanics in Civ games. It seems like an obvious choice for like a sort of management kind of sim or something like that, and yet it just doesn't really seem to have.
I think it's the same thing, is the same reason why you don't get very many detective games or police games, is that games struggle with human beings and with ambiguity. You know, when you've got a gun is a binary thing, you shoot a guy, he's dead or he's not. But if you're interrogating someone, if you're doing the kind of things that a spy does, which is trying to find pieces of information, then that's, I think, a much harder thing to do. I think you're right that it lends itself well to management games. Like, I think you could make a great Crusader Kings style game, which was about spies rather than medieval royalty, which is kind of what Sigma Theory is, but there's never been that many of those games. And I think it has to be quite robust as a simulation when you're dealing with so much information, so many people, in order to make it actually interesting. Because otherwise the alternative is that you've got to go down a linear route and you end up with something like L.A. Noire, which, you know, could just as easily have been spies rather than policemen. But yeah.
I think as well games struggle with reveals in that way, because a lot of the satisfaction of things like, just to take a long-running drama example, Spooks, there was a lot of sort of twists and turns by finding out that people were double agents, or that something had been happening behind the scenes that was only revealed to the viewer maybe in retrospect. And so there's a lot of sort of not really having a good way to figure out how to do that to a player character, unless maybe, I mean, you can do it a little bit in multiplayer stuff if you assign roles beforehand and, you know, people don't necessarily know who's working against you. You see it in board games with things like Battlestar Galactica. But I do think that if it's just you and you know that you're a double agent, the satisfaction of the halfway through is that gets punctured far too easily.
There's so many things involved in spy fiction that are enormously, as Graham says, human and analog. Like, it's all about intent and kind of people's sort of conflicted allegiances to themselves or to a nation, the politics of it. And that's why I think it's so complicated that when games do go there, they tend to go there. Like, most of the recent spy games I can think of have a cyberpunk. Either, like, I can think of games that go for either the cyberpunk direction, like Invisible Ink, which is sort of about spies. Kinda. And murder spies. Or they go in the sort of 60s spy fiction, kind of explicit, sort of quite abstract kind of James Bondy sort of fashion. I don't know if you would include the Clancy games in this at all. Like, it feels like there's something like Splinter Cell is a stealth game. It's not a spy game.
I think it's technically a spy, but it doesn't feel like a spy game, does it?
It's like James Bond makes a good model for a game spy because
he punches people and shoots people.
And drives a car. Yeah. And basically. But like, and you know, I think Alpha Protocol got quite close to this. I think if Alpha Protocol wasn't so wonky in so many ways, it would almost be a kind of proof that you can do a bit of spy fiction, because it does have double crosses. It does have mid-game reveals. It suffers for the fact that, you know, as a piece of spy fiction, the main guy can't have anything be revealed about him. He just has to remain Mike for the entire game. And
sorry, which game are we talking about
Alpha
now?
Protocol.
Okay, because I thought that you were still on James Bond and were calling him Mike.
Remains Mike.
Okay.
You know the famous line, Mike.
No, that's fine.
Mike.
I thought I'd double check that I hadn't missed some crucial reveal about the new Bond or something.
No, I suppose that's true that James Bond never reveals his double agent stuff.
007.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Shall we do the next question?
Yeah. Where's that going to come from?
That was vaguely an answer.
Put your hands up / grab the microphone / there's no system. Put your hands up. It's probably the best system. Yes.
Okay, well, staying vaguely on the topic of 60s and spy stuff, I have a really big soft spot for Evil Genius, that game that came out in like 2004 or 5, which was the reverse, where you were managing the lair of an evil genius and trying to take over the world with a doomsday device. Now, that's been kind of on ice for over a decade now, but if somebody were to make a remake or a sequel or something, which studio would you like to see doing that sort of really charming management game in a Dungeon Keeper-esque style?
We've got Machiavellian downstairs in the RPS room, which is where you play as somebody who is managing essentially like a house, a mansion, and trying to make it spooky and awful and, trying to, I guess, use horror tropes to your advantage to progress through the game. It's been a while since I played a build of it. We put it in there because it sounded really interesting. I don't think that necessarily answers the question quite, but I think it's kind of a thing that is existing.
From a studio,
around the edges.
I think Clay could do a really good job of that. I mean, they haven't made a bad game really, which helps, but they're the people who made Invisible Ink, and that's, I think, an easy I can imagine them making that was them taking on a sort of XCOM formula. They've done stealth as well, but I think they've got the kind of the art style and the design sensibility that they could make a really good go of.
They're making it a management game at the moment. They're doing Oxygen Not Included.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Which is currently out in alpha, which is like, you're building, a base for yourself in an asteroid, trying to manage the different gases that are floating around to make sure that you don't suffocate in a kind of dwarf fortressy sort of way. But I was going to say Introversion. Introversion is what I have about it, because obviously they've got management game pedigree in Prison Architect. But I think the reason that Evil Genius and stuff like Dungeon Keeper work particularly well was its sense of humor. I think Introversion, though they haven't done it in every game, are good at evoking that sort of 90s British sense of humor where it's funny when people die.
Yeah. The spirit of like Lionhead and
Bullfrog before that.
Bullfrog and I can see that. Cool. Should we take the next question? Gentleman at the front here. I think you got the mic.
Can I just say that I want Peter Molyneux to do a new...
Hi. You talked about everything earlier, which has been penned as this sort of consciousness simulator, I think, as a tagline underneath it. It's got this wonderful trailer with Alan Watts, this 60s philosopher, and it reminds me of some of those, maybe some of the old PlayStation games like Journey and stuff like that, where they're really trying to evoke this sort of like big philosophical message. But I feel like sometimes those games are kind of almost preaching to the converted in a way, and they don't get maybe quite the audience that they want to. And maybe, my question is basically, do you think that there are some games you guys have played, usually on PC, of course, that you feel like that are more accessible, that kind of maybe try and evoke that kind of philosophical, like a deeper philosophical message? Do they get that through, that across?
Something that I would say about everything is that it has released already, I think, on PS4, and I think that will probably do a lot to put it in front of people who maybe wouldn't necessarily seek it out if it was just maybe living on itch or something on PC. And I think the other thing is there's so much odd and delightful about it that you can put in a trailer. So I think that things like that will help that particular game, and you wouldn't necessarily have to engage with the text side of things. You could just sort of tit around as a baby turtle, for e.g. But yeah, I'm trying to think of other games that maybe sort of do that on I think for me, it's the sort of thing where it can sneak up on somebody in a variety of different ways. So it might just be that you've played a particular game, or maybe even a management sim or something completely off what you would maybe consider as a philosophy game. But it might just be that it hits you at a particular point in your day or your life or your way of thinking about things, and you are encouraged to maybe have a revelation of sorts, or a moment where you are actually just a bit more aware of just a particular way of being. And I know that sounds really flim-flammy, but I think that these things can sort of sneak up on you. It can just be when you're doing the washing up, or,
There's an interesting kind of phenomenon so lots of games got big audiences. The good games, the games like Braid, back in the first generation of Xbox Live Arcade, which, to go off piece a little bit, back when sort of the idea of downloading an indie game onto your console was new, and that was a new way of getting games for people.
there was a way those games I think picked up a big audience. Braid is a good game, but it was in the right place at the right time to get a certain head of steam with people. Just because it's something you can play, it doesn't cost as much as the games. The whole lower price point of those games on console was a novelty to some degree, and it's not about necessarily about whether or not you think Braid itself is philosophically deep or not, although it does have ideas that it wants to express. But simply by being in the right place at the right time with a puzzle platformer game that's fun, creates a vehicle for getting those ideas in front of people who I don't think would have necessarily, were all else equal, gravitated towards that kind of game. And I think that spirit, it probably is maintained in things like Limbo and most recently Inside. Like Inside is ultimately a game about, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a game about bodies and what it, and it has no words in it, but it's about your self and your consciousness and, the unpleasant experience of having that played with. And, I think it will reach people because it looks striking. I think even though it says PC Game Podcast up there, I think it's significant when these games have a presence on those console download services because I think that just brings them to more people who are, particularly given the nature of the question is how do you get a message, like a headier message from a game to an audience that will not actively seek out games with messages like that. And maybe the cop-out answer is make sure it's on the PlayStation Network. But I think there is something to, making some sort of grabby-looking, accessible game and then putting it in the right marketplace so that you don't have to go find it necessarily. But that's,
yeah. I don't have a good answer to the question because I can't think of a game. But I would say that Braid thing has also led to some tripe as well. There are a lot of games which are heavy with metaphor and lead with metaphor in the trailers about how they're about an exploration of grief, and then you actually play it and it's
a metaphor for
jumping between
Metroid,
platforms and
yes. I mean, I'm not advocating that like the only way to get a message across in a game is to have a small sad man run sideways. Like, there's more to Braid than that. But, there are, and I think maybe people imitated the wrong parts of the process of that game, and to some extent maybe Braid was a good platformer game that got away with its philosophical stuff because that stuff was a novelty at the time when it was released.
It's maybe Passage more than Braid because it's explicitly trying to use game mechanics as a metaphor, which I find great.
Right.
And Passage was literally a man walking to the right.
Right. I mean, the other side of this is things like, BioShock, right? Like, it's thinking about it, like, a lot of this stuff, so many things have been written about that game and so many things, arguably too many, maybe. Who knows? But like, you go back, how many years is that now?
2007?
Shit.
So
10 years. Fuck. You go back 10 years to, the first BioShock, and that, for the people who cared about that kind of thing, that was a resurrection of System Shock and whatever, you get people in for that. For a lot of people, it was just an interesting looking shooter, which was different to a lot of the things coming out at the time, and buried in it is a message, is a set of ideas. And I think, again, that has become a little bit trite. BioShock, subsequently, other games did a man reads, a philosophy book to you while you shoot a crazy mask murderer. The genre has ballooned since the original BioShock. But nonetheless, that was a way of surprising people with that kind of idea, I guess, and more people paid attention to it as a consequence. Bolt it to a shooter is what I'm saying. Shall we answer another question? Chaps. Jab at the back. Ish. Middle section. There. Him.
Oh. My microphone.
I was going to ask, why aren't there more good pirate games? Because I think the only two I can really think of, there's like Black Flag, and then going back slightly further is like Sid Meier's Pirates. Why aren't there more opportunities to run around in a frilly shirt and sail?
Why aren't there more good pirate games?
There's one coming up for Windows 10, isn't there? There's
Rare's game, yeah, that actually does look really good.
Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves, Graham, you're holding a microphone.
I don't know that my microphone's still on. Is it? Oh,
yeah, it is.
Hey. Then never mind. Yeah, Sea of Thieves looks alright, although it does feel a little bit sad that Black Wake came out in early access and does a similar thing, although it's not pirates, it's seafaring adventure and ship-to-ship combat.
Right. Somewhat like Hornblower.
There are a bunch of games that
Mastering
do
Commander.
experiment with being seafaring in some description as well. You just sort of, if you dig around on itch in odd moments like I do, then it's kind of like you will find a lot of things where people are just trying to experiment with maybe fluids, or maybe with, that sounded weird, with wave effects, or with navigation, or with, different ideas, and it's maybe a prototype. And so you do find interesting little experiments that do that. But no, I can't think of...
It's why people aren't stitching that stuff together into a pirate game with modern fluids. I suppose I could, if I was at home and there weren't like.
Because the video games industry doesn't like piracy.
Oh.
Hot take or joke.
I wanted to drop a mic, but anyways, it's not my mic, and even if it was my mic, I wouldn't drop it because these things are expensive. So.
And that's why you'll never do the proper mic drop ever. You're too respectful of property.
That's a better answer than what I was going to say. What I was going to say is like maybe there's just been too many Pirates of the Caribbean films, and if games lag after films to some degree in terms of what people are interested in a given time, maybe just people don't like pirates anymore.
Well, maybe it's also because some of it is really awkward to do well. Like when you're turning a ship and stuff, sometimes it's not like turning a car in a kind of satisfying way. There's a lot to it if you get it to feel natural, but then it doesn't necessarily work in terms of the actual physics, and so maybe it's too much of a series of trade-offs, and it's too problematic, and the actual motion is hard, and it's maybe an actual significant drain on memory or resources or.
So it's just really difficult.
Maybe it's
speaking on behalf of the games industry.
Hard.
It's too hard. Next question, anybody? Ooh. Oh, we got several. Pick one, Jonty. Just go to the one you love.
Okay, so like there aren't enough games about spies or pirates, and like there are like any number of topics that there are like too many games about. That's quite easy. What genre of game are there just the right number of games about that thing?
Oh. I literally just looked over there and saw Sonic. I was like, nah.
There's quite a lot of nice games about, wildlife. I like how well I'm catered to right now.
Are there enough though? You would like more though, right?
Well, I mean, I'd always like more,
well,
but
exactly.
but I wouldn't have time to then play them or judge them.
How about tennis?
Well, I was going to say football. I feel like there are just the right number of football games. I feel like, you need one good management game, two or three good for actual real-time play. That's about it.
There's no gap there that you feel like is underserved.
No.
Did you play, because I haven't spoken to you since it came out, did you play any further than your feet? Did
you
go on the journey?
Yeah, I reviewed it. I did. I went on the journey.
How was that?
It was guff. It was about what
proving, I guess, that the genre is exactly where it needs to be.
What's his name? Is it like Aiden Spyman?
It's like Alex Ryder or something like that.
Alex.
It's the
Aiden Spyman and Alex Ryder in football.
It's a game about fist pumping. It's like you and your best friend both get promoted through a youth academy at a football club at the same time, and you fist bump in every single cutscene for like the first 4 or 5, and then the turning point in the relationship where your best friend turns out to be an ass. You go to fist bump him, and he just walks away, and that's like the dramatic turn for the entire plot.
You are making this sound amazing.
Would watch.
I've never cared about a football game until now, apparently. Graham's mic, anyone? No? It's off.
You can control it. Whoa, God. I'm suddenly loud. You can control it, just playing as that individual player, just as Alex Ryder, or I think that's his name, rather than controlling the entire team that he's on. And then you can just be terrible. Like, it's really hard to play FIFA as just an individual player on the pitch, especially if you don't be a striker. I chose to be a midfielder. And so in every single match, my ratings were like 5 out of 10, that sort of stuff. But the plot just continues the same as it would do anyway. Like, the plot beats aren't reflective of your actual performance. And so you still just like ascend, even though you're the worst thing on the pitch and the worst thing about the team. There's little bits of like they'll drop you to the bench and that sort of stuff, but still for like big plot important games, suddenly you're back on the team again, and it, for no particular reason. So I got to go to the FA Cup final.
However, would you say that there is space in the market for, e.g., a Footballers' Wives style game, where you need to navigate the pitfalls of success and the off-the-field things?
There is that game. It's called New Star Soccer. It's a little bit less like that, I think, since it made the switch to mobile, but it originally started on PC, and you control an individual footballer, who again starts at like a kind of non-league club and then makes your way through the career, but then it also includes stuff like paparazzi chasing you down, how you spend your money, you can get involved in, or you used to be able to get involved in stuff like drugs and alcohol and scandal and all that sort of stuff, like controlling your off-pitch antics. And I think there's definitely space for that. Yep. Because I used to read Championship Manager fan fiction, which sometimes would just be after-action reports where they would just relate the scores and the fixtures and stuff like that, but oftentimes they would dramatize the lives of their managers and the wives of the managers and so on.
So somebody that I vaguely knew on a live journal community used to write Liverpool erotica.
Liverpool Football Club erotica,
so
right?
Liverpool football / fic. So, yeah, that was interesting.
Okay, that's a good story.
Sorry, that was just, I was trying to help by letting you know you weren't alone, but then I thought maybe I've just accidentally put myself in a worse position and I should never have taken the microphone.
I thought maybe it was like, Liverpool erotic fiction. It was like an everything thing. Like the city was going
encounter
around
with the Liver building.
Chatting with other cities, getting into philosophical debates.
On again, off again relationship with Manchester. I say that as a Liverpoolian, so this entire thing is profoundly strange. Anyway, so we've established football is the game that there are enough of. Thank you. Let's segue on to Gary. Hello. Gary's actually making a game about naval combat, so there you go, there's your pirate.
As much as I'd like to know more about Championship Manager fan fiction. I was wondering if there's any games that you guys, that everybody loves, but just didn't quite resonate for you.
I don't want to go first.
Pretty much all of the classics, because I was too late for most of them, because I was more console when I was growing up. I didn't have a PC that was capable of most of these things, or that my brother would stop playing on for long enough to actually try most things. So I was more of a console kid, and so I have tried to go back and play classics just for the sake of having the comparison point, even if I don't have the context, and it's just not possible to get the same out of them, I don't think. And so there are just huge patches of, when people who I'm colleagues with will go misty-eyed over things, and I'm just like, really? Because I was playing Conquer or something at the time. But yeah, so there's a lot of that. And then I'm trying to think, what other, I don't know. I don't really like Skyrim. I like Oblivion more than I like Skyrim.
Well, I used to think that...
But you have a map of Skyrim on your wall.
I like maps. Sorry, yes, I like maps.
Didn't you spend ages modding Skyrim, though? Wasn't it just that's why you don't like it, because you couldn't get it to look perfect?
Right. So, I like Oblivion, and I was kind of hoping that Skyrim would be more of the same, and then they were like, no, we have grand ideas, and I was like, but I just want to build my herbarium. Like, what is this? Chasing nun route around. But anyway, and so I kind of didn't really enjoy it when I sat down to play it, but then I got super excited to maybe mod it and sort of experience that side of things. But then I got really obsessed with fixing everything with modding so that it was the perfect experience. And obviously that only really works if everything that you want to do coincides with something that a modder wants to do. And so I have the most beautiful glaciers in the history of everything. And then the trees didn't move right in the wind, so I stopped playing. Just never went back. Just can't deal with it anymore. Don't like it.
Graham, what do you inexplicably dislike?
Well, I don't think it is inexplicable, but I used to think that, like, I could come to, like, if other people liked a game, like if it was obviously good on some level, that if I just persevered with it, then eventually I would crack through, I would get over the hump, I would learn how to play it, I would learn how to like it. But now that I'm a bit more time-starved, I've decided that it's the game's fault when that doesn't happen. And so I'm going to pick a fight with Chris, but I've tried to play Mass Effect 1 like 3 times, and every time I get about 3 hours into it, and I just give up. And I used to think, I'm sure if I persevere, I'll eventually get into it. But really, I think if I play 3 hours of a thing, and I'm just a bit bored, and I don't enjoy the combat that much, and none of the characters have leapt out to me yet, I don't care that they will do later. I think the game is to blame.
That's a perfectly reasonable viewpoint. I respect you for holding it. I do, genuinely. That's a perfectly reasonable response to the first Mass Effect game. What? It's alright. It's alright.
Spies are better.
What?
Spies are better.
Spies are... Now you've done it.
So what do you have?
So this is tricky because, like, I'm sort of similar in that I was trying to think, like, it's more of an emotional thing than I think a kind of... I couldn't think of a game where it's like, everyone rates this, but I see some flaw with it. Partly because that tends to be like, I don't enjoy having that feeling if it comes across. Like, I always feel like I might be wrong, and I'd rather learn why people do get something out of it. The thing that sticks in so many people's memories is like a phenomenal game that defined lots of people's gaming that I could never get into was Age of Empires 2. I think maybe it's the game that I most firmly bounced off, and it's because it's a little bit like how as a child I was really into Sonic and not Mario. It's because I've got terrible taste and preferred Command and Conquer in every possible iteration because...
But Command and Conquer was better, so it's the opposite of Sonic and Mario.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought the Age of Empires 2 was like the thinking... I assume this because I assume the thing that I like is dumb. I liked Command & Conquer because it had, like, a shouty Tim Curry. And, stupid cutscenes. And dogs. It had dogs in it. There were no good reasons for me to like it, whereas Age of Empires felt like a game that someone who knew what they were talking about might like.
Don't be lured by the historical setting.
Right.
I think that's what you're doing is wrong there. Command and Conquer, I think, was
I like that video where a man says "Wololo" over and over again. That's good.
That is a good video. I also never played Age of Empires 2.
Right.
I played Command and Conquer.
Oh, so you're winging it as well. Yeah. I suppose the one recently as well is The Witcher. I've mentioned this a few times, but like, The Witcher, I have no strong feelings about it because I haven't played the second one or the third one, even though it's the type of thing that obviously I should have played given all the other things I like. But it has become that TV series that everyone tells you about that you will never watch under any circumstances for no reason. I can't. You know what I mean? It's like
The Wire.
Yeah. Mad Men for me, right? I've seen most of the first season of Mad Men. I've played most of the first Witcher game. I'll die before finishing either of those things. Soon or in the future. Who knows? I don't. But I'll never play The Witcher, apparently. Anyway. Next question. Yes, we have time for one more, John T. So you're the keeper of the question phone.
No, I couldn't possibly take this from...
Okay, hang on. So hands up if you'd like to ask a question. There's two of you. Did you ask... were you that's no, okay. Let's find out. Is there any way we can combine your two questions?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to cop out here, John T. Two questions. One answer.
We'll try.
What was your question, sir?
Okay, so as an archaeologist,
cool.
I feel like there's, if there's games about trains and there's games about almost everything under the sun, but there's no games about archaeologists, and I don't count Lara Croft, so that's looting.
Okay.
So, are there
Indiana Jones
looting? So basically, are there any games or any professions which you really wish there was a game of, but which there aren't, or which there aren't any good ones of?
Okay, interesting. All right, so we've got point A. So can we get the mic to the chap at the back? Point A is respectful archaeology. Point B is jobs. Okay, and now part 2.
My question was just 4-player co-op story games. Is this something that has now moved across entirely to the console market and PC games just aren't doing it anymore?
Right.
Do you think we're in the middle of a big development surge and there'll be a few in a while, or is it always a low yield thing?
I think it's so co-op story games. Jonty, we can do this in 6 minutes. It's
Yes.
fine. All right. Co-op story games.
So co-op story games, I played Monster Prom when I was out at GDC, and I think it doesn't quite work the more people that you have involved, but it is still trying to do like an episodic passing the controller thing, and it is on PC, or it's going to be on PC. So it is very much like passing it around, making decisions, telling your own story through visiting locations at a school with like a little monstery kind of theme, like there's ghosts and
schools as a job.
Frankensteins and things like that. And in terms of the archaeology thing, there is Mew archaeologist, is that what it, I can't
Mew
remember.
cartographer.
Yeah, Mew cartographer feels like it maybe treads in that basic direction. And then there's a few things on like, Itch.io, which is interesting. But in terms of professions, I mean, I kind of trained to be a librarian for a while, and that is a thing that is not really served in any respectful way in most branches of media, to be honest. So it's like, you know, you can have sexy librarians, and you can have Giles from Buffy, and you can have Jenny from Buffy. She was an information witch, wasn't she? But yeah, so librarian would be an interesting one, apart from just, you know, mostly it's just now using Google Foo and telling people where to look for journal articles and things. But yeah.
We've got, in terms of co-op, story, like narrative co-op, I think,
yeah, you can play that 4-player, can't you?
I think so. The other one I was going to mention is the Divinity series. Like, I think that's a really good example of probably the most advanced, like, 2-player co-op story-based thing that's been for a couple of years, and that's a very PC game. It's on console, but it's an isometric RPG with those elements. However, it doesn't feature a real job. Also a lot of looting, so not real archaeology. Uncharted, not real archaeology.
Does it have to be a real job? Because like I like Valhalla,
Wizard.
which is a cyberpunk bartending sim. And so I would quite like, you know, a game in which I was the chef on a spaceship. I know I keep saying that spies are better, but I do also like spaceships.
You can't be like a spy chef, so that's not gonna work.
No, but if I could be like, you know, Jet from Space Cowboy or something like that, that would be cool.
Good
Thank
system.
you.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think, no, don't make a game about writing. That's the worst idea.
Detective Chef, though, that was Pie in the Sky.
That is true.
Yeah.
We've solved
We should have the
all
game
of these questions.
Pie in the Sky. That would be nice.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Sorry.
Cool. So, in terms of answering 3 questions in 1 question is hard.
Well, the Pie in the Sky game could be 4-player co-op. You know, one of you
so
plays the
good.
chef, the other one's his assistant that's always getting into scrapes with the law.
Yeah.
I can't remember the other characters.
Or
I
you
think it was a
play-
florist.
Yeah, or you play like Morse and Lewis and whoever Lewis's assistant then or like Midsummer Murders, you could have Barnaby and then Barnaby's weird cousin and like Troy and that other guy who is really annoying and also kind of thick, and then someone was just like, oh, I can't believe that you like knew all of this stuff, and he was like, oh, I really didn't, when he was tied up in the basement of the cricket thing.
Yeah. Is there a box up on that rafter that says RPS on it?
Oh,
Is that where you live?
Just drop owl pellets down on people from above.
But this, I mean, just maybe to, you know, it just occurred to me when you mentioned florist, please no one else read anything into this link. It occurred to me that, I believe on Steam Greenlight this week was Weed Shop 2.
Is that about drugs?
Yes.
Oh, I thought maybe it was about like dandelions or something. Okay.
No.
Is that a good note to maybe
Yes.
stop and go to the pub?
Yes. So, we'll do, I'll record a separate outro because we are going to get kicked out of here. We don't do this song at the end. Can't stop it.
I've forgotten how the song goes.
Everybody who's in this room and everyone who's listened, thank you so much for coming out and listening to this podcast. I hope you had fun. Thank you for asking questions. We are going to the...
Kick-Ons is the Captain Kid for the
What?
RPS.
The Captain Kid,
RPS
the
mixer.
pirate-themed mixer. For this pirate-themed podcast. So yeah, thank you so much, and I think it would be remiss if we didn't end by saying
Oh, thanks
for listening, everybody, and all together.
Thanks for listening indeed, past me. It's me again, I'm back, to tell you that if you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at crateandcrowbar and hang out on our Discord, the link for which is on the website at crateandcrowbar.com. If you would like to follow us all as individuals, I'm at C Thurston, that is CTHURSTEN. Pip is at Philippa War, which is PHILIPPAWARR, and Graham is at Gonas, which is GONNAS. Aren't you impressed that I remembered all of that off the top of my head? I know I am. Anyway,